Welcome back to the Corral. Thanks for checking in. This is the final episode of the Superman celebration because of the new film that's come out. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics when it comes to DC Comics and Superman comics, and that's the 80-page giants. Let's talk about the 80-page giants because I have quite an interesting relationship with some of them. This is the first Superman annual, which was 80 pages, and it is a collection of previously published stories. Most of the 80-page giants, if not all of them, were reprints. Later on, DC in modern times, they did 80-page giants that were new stories, or a new story. They still do the 80-pagers now and again. They also do the 100-pagers. Anyways, you had Super Baby, Lois Lane, Superboy, Jimmy Olsen, Crypto, Perry White, Lori the Mermaid, Lana Lang, Jor-El, and Supergirl with a classic Kurt Swan cover, reprinting all of these fantastic tales. This is the first annual, and this is the original from 1960, and then it's been reprinted. I think Mike Carlin was involved in the reprint. It's a facsimile reprint, and I have a couple of those. And I wish they would do that with this other one that I'm going to show you in a moment. So the first annual was reprinted, and it remains an iconic moment in the history of DC Comics publications because now they had a 25-cent book that could make money for them by reprinting vintage material. Some of that vintage material was only a few years old. Some of it is, even older. But by now they'd had, 20 years of Superman comic books on the market. So they had plenty of material to draw from. So they reprint them. That leads us to my famous fascination. I acquired this later, and my original copy was later. When I began collecting, you'd find stuff in antique shops or whatever. And in 1964, they did the first 80-page giant, not to be confused with the first Superman annual. This I acquired. In fact, this is my original copy right here. And I always know this is my original copy because it has a little clip here on the top where it didn't quite survive. Got worn. This features, for 25 cents, the newest collection of the greatest super stories ever published. I actually have some of these stories in original editions that I would go and find. If Superman turned to crime, if Superman couldn't save the world, if the Kents had adopted Supergirl, kind of an imaginary story. Remember, they did a lot of imaginary stories. And then if Superman retired. These are fantastic tales from 1964, and this is probably my favorite childhood memory of reading a Superman comic. 1964, the Beatles come to the United States. What a great year that was. And, featuring Superman's most fabulous imaginary adventures. Really an amazing collection. And over the years, in a previous episode I showed this and I talked about it. I'll do it again. I didn't know until this year that I had 4 of them. I thought I had 3. I had 2. I found 2. All right. And then I found a third one. And then I found the 4th one. And so I actually have 4 of these. So obviously this is a book. It's going to be hard to show this. This is a book that is obviously quite important to me when you look at it because I have 4 of them. Here's the truth about this comic because I loved it so much as a child. If I were in a comic shop today, comic shops generally don't give you good prices on vintage material. But let's say I'm in one and I found it for a reasonable price. $10, lower grade, and the cover's intact, I'm going to buy it. So then I'm going to have 5. So, it's the collector's problem, I call it, but it's a beautiful problem to have. That I have 4 of these fantastic books, here copies of my favorite Superman comic from my childhood. Brings back memories of reading them with my father. You know, here you go, Dad, and then he'd give it back to me, hand him another one. So, a lot of emotional connections for me with this one, that I have 4 copies. I don't know if I'll ever buy a 5th. I don't really need it, do I? But it's a great comic book. I really loved the 80-page Giants. Here's the Superboy #1 from roughly the same period, 64, I think. The 80-page Giant #1 for Superboy, the Superboy Annual. So it's confusing. They would do the 80-pagers, and then they would do the annuals. And, you know, it's the same thing. The origin of Crypto is in this one, so we should get a reprint of that. Super Baby in Scotland Yard, Superboy and Power Boy, Clark Kent's first haircut, and King Crypto. You know, hey, it was the 60s, man. It was cool. Here's a Giant Superman Annual, and this is #3, an all-star collection of stories featuring the strange lives of Superman. Again, this is when Superman went through this phase where he could be transformed into anything. You know, he might become a lion, or a big ugly Superman, or the masked Superman, or the future Superman with a big head. He might become a werewolf. Let's say, or something like that. I mean, it was so fun to see the predicaments. And the DC writers at the time, including Jerry Siegel, who was still off and on with DC, really put out some very imaginative tales during that period. I just love the Giants, the 80-page Giants and the annuals from the 60s and 70s. This is #4, which feature Superman becomes an alien's pet. He battles a super foe. He meets Superboy in the past that was tricky, awakes in the future, and blah, blah, blah. So this is material that really stretched the imagination. These might be a little out of order. This is #6. Again, the same thing. The first story of the Legion of Superheroes is reprinted here. So this is kind of a key Giant Superman Annual to get for 25 cents, which was cool. This is also one of my favorites, #11, the 80-page Giant, featuring Superman's greatest Superman-Luthor duels. I believe that this particular issue is really the issue that, because it collected the Luthor stories, really put Luthor at the forefront of arch enemies for Superman. I really think this is what did it, because people were influenced by this particular comic, because it had a bunch of Luthor stories, and from this point on, Luthor is his arch enemy. I believe that comic alone did it more than anything else. Here's a Giant Superman, 80-page Giant, and this is later. This is actually Superman #183. So they reverted to the numbering sequence. They would have a month where they wouldn't have fresh material, and they would simply put out an 80-page Giant Superman reprints of classic stories to cover themselves for a month while the artists and writers caught up. This was a standard operating procedure for DC Comics during this period. The same with Action Comics. This is Action Comics #360 with Supergirl stories, artwork by Kurt Swan on the cover. Classic issue of Action Comics, because it was a Supergirl compilation. You gotta have it, if you're a collector. The Checkered Years, I love that. This is a Clark Kent issue. This is Superman 197. Again, they had to fill in the gap. They needed a break while the artists and writers caught up. So they collected the all Clark Kent issue featuring Superman's alter ego. I have some of these originals as well, because I have so much. And it's just great fun that they did that. And this is a habit that they continued for years. Just a couple more, and then we'll wrap it up. Here's a later one. Superman 232. Again, it was a Superman Giant. It doesn't say 80 pages, but it's the same process is going on here. And I just had a light go off above me, but hopefully you can still see me. Hey, I'm in the dark. It would be remiss. I don't want to be remiss and forget to mention the Lois Lane 80-page Giants. Here's Lois Lane #77, which reprints the first Lois Lane story. And this is a great one to have. Kurt Schaffenberger did most of the artwork for Lois Lane. He was a wonderful artist. And then two final ones. All of the DC titles had giants, and then World's Finest. This is World's Finest number 161, featuring Superman and Batman, the early ones. So here in the 60s, we're getting a look back. These have all been reprinted, many, many times. And then we have World's Finest number 170. Again, classic Superman, Batman, Golden Age reprint adventures. I love the 80-page giants. So, my friends, that concludes a month of Superman. Let me see if I can get this light back on. Oh, look. Oh, no, it didn't work, did it? I shed some light on it. Oh, it didn't work. Whatever. I have to get that light fixed. In the meantime, I hope I've shed some light on the classic Superman comics of the past, and I hope that you enjoyed these episodes. I really hope we all enjoy the film. Let us have our best hopes up there for that. I have a feeling it's going to be good. And let us continue to collect books, comic books, promote reading and literacy with our children, our grandchildren, and whoever comes along. And feed your mind, my friends. Stay well, stay happy. Feed your brains. Read a book.